Thanks everybody for joining me today. I appreciate it. This is going to be a fun webinar for me today. When I was asked to present on this topic of kind of debunking some of the common myths of direct access, this is a fun one because there are a number of them. Some of them are trivial, some of them are pretty serious, and I think it would be fun to spend a little time going over some of the common myths and really explaining how they became myths, and spend a little time kind of clarifying some of those things for you and help you guys plan effectively and accurately your direct access deployment. So brief introduction. My name is Richard Hicks. I am the Technical Services Director here for Celestix Networks. I'm also a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in the Enterprise Security discipline. I have some Microsoft certifications. I've been in the business quite a long time, spending most of my time with Microsoft-based edge security and remote access solutions and deploying those for some of the largest companies in the world. I'll also apologize up front today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, and so you're not going to get my usual level of enthusiasm. So I'll apologize in advance for that. And if I cough, I'll try to hit the mute quickly. So anyway. Moving on, Celestix Networks has been around for quite a while too. We started business in 1999. Security-focused product company. Our original platform offering was based on Checkpoint running on Linux, and we did that for a number of years before we were asked by Microsoft to partner with them to develop the first Microsoft-based edge security solutions using Microsoft ISA Server and Microsoft Intelligent Application Gateway many years ago. We have a fairly substantial worldwide presence. We have offices all over the world. We have offices here, headquartered here in the Bay Area in Northern California, but we do have offices and a presence in the UK, Europe, Asia Pacific as well. So we have a fairly wide reach. We have customers across all verticals, and our solutions are available through a number of different platforms, or through a number of different resellers and distributors around the world. You should not have any challenges locating our gear from your favorite reseller. So before we get on to the topic of debunking some of these myths of direct access, I kind of want to take a step back, and I want to I basically want to have like a level set, just a very brief introduction of direct access. I realize that there may be one or two of you who are on the call that may not be familiar with direct access, so in this case it'll give you at least a short, quick primer as to what it is. So direct access is a remote access solution that's provided with Microsoft. It's a part of the Windows Server 2012 R2 network operating system, and it's a very interesting remote access solution, and it's designed to provide seamless and transparent, always-on, bidirectional network connectivity. And the bidirectional component is really what differentiates it from client-based VPN as well. It's based on Microsoft platform technologies, so it's not, direct access isn't necessarily a protocol, but it's built on a number of different technologies that many of you will be intimately familiar with. Things like IPsec, Active Directory, certificates, and IPsec, and IPv6. Sometimes, the IT administrators and the network administrators that I talk to, may not be real comfortable with things like IPsec and certificates, but certainly when you mention that this solution uses IPv6, you will get some eyes light up in the room because there's a general panic. Nobody seems to have a lot of working knowledge for IPv6 these days. But direct access from a client perspective is IPv6 only. It communicates from the direct access client to the direct access server exclusively using IPv6. And so this leads us to the first myth, and that is that IPv6 connectivity is required for direct access. Now, this is a myth, and I'll explain why. Many network engineers believe that IPv6 connectivity is required since it uses IPv6, that they have to deploy IPv6 on their corporate intranet, or that the direct access server and the direct access clients have to be on the IPv6 internet, and many organizations just don't have IPv6 address space from their ISPs. They're obviously their clients, when they're going out in the world and to coffee shops and hotels and at home and things like that, probably don't have IPv6. So what is it that prevents us from requiring to deploy IPv6 to handle this solution? Well, DirectAccess makes use of what's known as IPv6 transition protocols. Some protocols you may be familiar with, like 64, Teredo, and IP-HTTPS. These protocols are designed to allow the client to communicate IPv6 over the IPv4 public internet. So for example, if the client is on the IPv4 internet, which is probably about 100% of the time these days, 99.9% of the time easily, they will still need to talk IPv6 to the DA gateway, and in this case we're going to use a transition protocol, either 64, Teredo, or IP-HTTPS. Each of those are designed to work in different scenarios, but at the end of the day, the client and the server will agree to use one of those to tunnel the IPv6 traffic over the IPv4 internet so that it can communicate with the DirectAccess gateway. Now, from there, how does it talk to your CorpNet when your CorpNet doesn't have IPv6 deployed? So in that case, we're going to use what's known as IPv6 translation protocols, and there's two of them that DirectAccess employs, and that is DNS64 and NAT64. So these two work together and hand in hand to allow the DirectAccess client, speaking IPv6 only, to talk to CorpNet resources that are running only IPv4. And so the DNS64 service basically listens for DNS requests, so the DirectAccess client is configured to use the DNS64 service as its DNS server for the internal namespace. It will make a name resolution request, usually it'll make a quad A host record request. The client will, of course, the DirectAccess server with the DNS64 service will talk to your on-premises CorpNet DNS servers and make an A record request and get the IPv4 address back. Now, the DNS64 service will then synthesize, or just basically create an IPv6 address that maps that name to that IPv4 address internally, and then it's the job of the NAT64 service, when the TCP/IP stack begins to communicate, to map that host name to that that IPv6 address to that internal IPv4 resource. So that natting, or that translation and mapping, is handled by the NAT64 service. So to deploy DirectAccess, no IPv6 deployments are required either on the internet or on the corporate network. So the next myth is an interesting one, and this has some basis in reality. It's just that things have changed a bit, but it still seems to stick around. And that is that the DirectAccess server must be connected to the public internet. This is a myth, but this myth is based in somewhat in reality, because previous iterations of DirectAccess did require that the DirectAccess server be connected directly to the public internet. So if you ever deployed DirectAccess using Windows Server 2008 R2 or Forefront UAG, it had a hard and fast requirement that you deploy it directly on the public internet and assign 2 consecutive public IPv4 addresses. That's changed in Windows Server 2012 R2, and DirectAccess has a much more flexible networking model in Windows Server 2000 R2 than it does in previous versions. So you can still deploy the DirectAccess server edge-facing and assign public IPv4 addresses to the external interface. The challenge there is that when you're having conversations with security administrators, the notion of deploying a domain-joined server directly to the public internet is not a good conversation to have. So the reason this new flexible networking model is in place is because Microsoft wanted to address that concern. So in Windows Server 2012 R2, of course, you can deploy DirectAccess using DMZ or perimeter deployment using private IPv4 addresses. So in that case, the external network interface of the DirectAccess gateway would have a private IPv4 address, and then the public IP address would be assigned to the external interface of your existing edge firewall, and then you can, of course, inspect and log that traffic and then translate it into the DirectAccess server. So you can use your existing edge security solution to provide an additional layer of protection for the DirectAccess server. It comes with some pretty serious consequences, though. There may be some times when you may want to consider an edge-facing deployment, but if you have questions about that, what I would suggest is that you drop me a note after the session, and I can point you to some documentation that will provide kind of a detailed analysis of when to use what deployment. Finally, DirectAccess supports single NIC mode, so this is particularly helpful for those security architects who like the walled garden infrastructure. So often we deploy DirectAccess with an external interface in the DMZ and the internal interface on the corporate LAN. But we do have customers who have security policy or audit and compliance requirements that state that that traffic can't be delivered to the LAN without at least being funneled through some sort of intrusion detection and prevention device, or it might even need to be controlled via ACL. So in that case, the single NIC deployment works well in a walled garden. It simplifies the deployment. There aren't any real disadvantages deploying single NIC, but it is helpful in some of those deployment scenarios. So the next myth is a very interesting one, and I was actually surprised at the number of people who have approached me on this. And this myth states that DirectAccess clients must have a TPM, or a trusted platform module. This was interesting because I had a number of people approach me about this, and I couldn't imagine where they were getting this from. Looking through all of the documentation on Microsoft TechNet, and of course having deployed it countless times, I can tell you and testify 100% that it does not require this. But yet I was still getting this pushback from customers who said, yeah, I'd like to deploy it, but I don't, on my laptops don't have TPMs. They're older. This is interesting, and this again is a myth, but this myth is a unique one in that it's basically a misunderstanding of some existing documentation from Microsoft. So, for example, let's say you were using your favorite internet search engine and you were looking up information about DirectAccess, and you ran across this document, setting up DirectAccess. Get started with DirectAccess. Well, this looks interesting. I'll open this document, and the first thing you'll see is that this is from Microsoft, and it talks about setting up DirectAccess. Awesome. Let's read through it. Immediately, it says check your computer for a TPM chip. And so many people thought, oh my gosh, I have to have a TPM to deploy DirectAccess? Well, I don't have that, so I can't deploy that. But the challenge here is that this document is somewhat misleading. First of all, you'll notice that this is a document from the Microsoft IT Showcase. This document details or describes or demonstrates the Microsoft internal DirectAccess deployment for their solution. They have a specific requirement as a design choice to run TPMs to support DirectAccess. But again, this is a design change, or this is a design choice as opposed to a hard and fast requirement. I can tell you absolutely TPM is optional. You do not have to have a trusted platform module to take advantage of DirectAccess. If you do have TPM and you want to explore virtual smart cards, certainly that's a way to provide an additional layer of authentication. But again, at the end of the day, TPM is optional and not required. Now, the next one is interesting in that I'm misleading you just a bit on this, and I'll explain why in just a second. But there's a myth that public key infrastructure, or PKI, is required to deploy DirectAccess. Once again, this is a myth. A PKI is not required, and you'll notice I put an asterisk there, in certain scenarios. We still recommend a PKI for a couple of different reasons, but let's talk about these scenarios where a PKI is not required. A PKI is optional when you're deploying DirectAccess to support only Windows 8 and later clients, and when you're deploying DirectAccess in a very basic configuration. PKI, unfortunately, is required anytime you have to support Windows 7 clients, which is going to be the vast majority of you. Anytime you want to take advantage of additional features and capabilities, or advanced features and capabilities in DirectAccess, like one-time passwords or network access protection integration, multi-site deployments also require a PKI. DirectAccess uses certificates for authentication and encryption, whether or not a PKI is in place. So if it still has to use certificates, of course, without a PKI, we're just using self-signed, non-managed certificates, and from a security perspective, that poses a number of challenges. So the general recommendation from Celestix is that for all deployments, we would like you to deploy DirectAccess with a PKI because it does make for a more robust solution. It does make it more flexible for you. You don't have to re-architect things later if you want to support additional features. And at the end of the day, it does make for a more secure DirectAccess platform. And with managed certificates from PKI, you have much more control over authentication for your DirectAccess clients. Next myth is interesting, and this is one that pops up on a fairly regular basis when I'm having calls with customers, mostly with larger customers because they seem to be very sensitive to this. Many customers think that major changes are required to Active Directory to support DirectAccess, and again, once again, that is a myth. There are no major changes required to AD. There are no schema changes as a part of Active Directory or as a part of a DirectAccess deployment. There are no specific Active Directory, Forest, or domain functional level requirements. As a matter of fact, the only requirement is whatever's the minimum supported by Microsoft, which means today that's Windows 2003. So, and that, of course, that might be changing soon. But today, you could deploy DirectAccess with all of your domain controllers being Windows Server 2003. Honestly, and AD, Forest, and domain functional level at 2003, and have a DirectAccess deployment working. The only thing DirectAccess does is that when you walk through the remote access management console is that it deploys group policy objects. So when you go through the configuration wizard, it deploys or it packages those settings into group policy objects, and then we use security filtering to apply those settings only to the DirectAccess servers and the DirectAccess clients. So it's fairly simple and straightforward like that. Just a couple of group GPOs, and those are security filtered to the specific clients that require it and servers that require it. Now here's my favorite myth, and this one gets a lot of pushback because a lot of people don't think this is a myth. So if you don't agree with me, I would love to hear your pushback and your feedback on this, and I would love to have this conversation with you. But there's a myth, I believe is a myth, is that split tunneling is a security risk. Split tunneling is enabled by default in DirectAccess. There is an option to disable split tunneling, and basically the option is called enable force tunneling. I believe it's a myth for a couple of reasons, and I want to take you through a couple of points that I believe will at least articulate my view on this. So first of all, one of the reasons I believe is that split tunneling isn't a risk is that this comes out of legacy thinking. And I'll be honest with you, I was in this group. So I come from a networking and security background working for a very large US-based Fortune 100 financial services institution. I implemented, supported, and managed a remote access solution for business partners. And so I implemented VPN and supported that on a daily basis for many years. And for me, when I first was approached, when I first got involved with DirectAccess and found that split tunneling was enabled by default, my first reaction, knee-jerk reaction really, was that, how could that be? That's bad security practice. It's bad security practice, but it's really based on historical configuration for client-based VPN. And I think if you really ask yourself the hard question, and that is, what is the specific risk that split tunneling poses? When I talk to customers and they say, oh, I have to disable split tunneling, I have to enable force tunneling, one of the reasons that one of the things that I'll first do is say, well, let's talk about this. What is it specifically that you're looking to protect against? What are the risks, and are they perceived or are they actual risks? And I would argue that most of them are actually just perceived risks or not mitigated by force tunneling, or mitigated elegantly by force tunneling. Let's put it that way. So one of the most common pushbacks is when I'm talking to customers about DirectAccess and force tunneling. They say, well, I don't want my DirectAccess clients to have unrestricted access to the internet. I don't want them visiting the bad sites. I don't want them getting malware. I don't want them downloading, viruses and malicious software. Unsavory things like that. I get that. I fully understand that. Force tunneling will address this, but force tunneling is so heavy-handed and so broad that there are much more elegant ways to address this specific concern. What I recommend to customers is if you have a concern with direct access clients, having unfettered internet access, deploy a content filtering solution that supports remote clients. Many on-premises solutions today, Websites Content Gateway and many of the other on-premises solutions, I would assume that the McAfee's and Semantics of the world, their gateways, probably even the new F5 solution, all support enforcing filtering policy, web-based web filtering policy for remote clients. There are also cloud-based solutions that are outstanding, and they provide a high level of protection for your clients, regardless of where they are in the world. So what I encourage you to do is look at those solutions. You may have an existing solution that you can leverage. The cloud-based solutions are extremely cost-effective and easy to set up, and again, then you don't have the challenges that you get when you enable forced tunneling. One of the biggest problems with forced tunneling is that it forces, again, intuitively, all of the traffic from the client back over the IPsec tunnels. And then there are a number of challenges with that. Of course, you can apply your web filtering policy using your on-premises gateways, but with all of that traffic coming back through the direct access tunnels, the user experience is very poor. Often they can't get to captive portals, they can't get to local resources on the subnet, and the user experience really goes in the toilet. Try to keep it clean here. Really goes in the toilet when you enable forced tunneling. The other pushback we get, and that I hear consistently about split tunneling as well, if my direct access client is lost or stolen or it's compromised, then the user has access to the CorpNet. What I would say is that if you employ good, thorough remote access security policy, you can mitigate all of those concerns just by doing so. So in other words, things like enabling disk encryption with a boot pin, enabling, what am I thinking of, screensavers, right? So a screensaver goes at 5 minutes and requires you to authenticate. There's a number of different things you can do. Now, of course, if a device is lost or stolen and it's in the hands of an attacker, they do own the physical device, and if you remember the 10 immutable laws, if they own your device, it really is game over at that point. But again, if you have that policy in place that states, hey, when a user loses a device, they need to call into the help desk and notify the help desk administrators that their device is no longer, it may not be lost or stolen, but they no longer have it in their possession. You have some tools and capabilities to be able to disconnect those direct access sessions, revoke certificates, or terminate those sessions and prevent that user from logging on. And again, if you have things like a BitLocker with the boot pin, once the device powers off and powers on, they won't even be able to get to the physical device any longer. And honestly, those are all good policies to have in place for client-based VPN, not even just direct access as well. And then the last point with regards to split tunneling is that many customers that I talk to who are afraid of split tunneling provide client-based VPN to their clients today. And when I ask them what happens when the client disables the VPN, do they have full internet access, the answer is often yes. So it's an interesting thing because they still have the security risk today, but with direct access, all of a sudden, because there's a setting and they feel like they want to set that, they want to approach that and make that setting. So I would just caution you, based on my experience, it's not an ideal way to go. At the end of the day, again, with direct access and split tunneling not being a security risk, direct access allows your field-based clients, your remote clients, to be more secure, better defended, because they're always managed. So you are in a much better position to control the security posture of your clients, as opposed to VPN. When you send a laptop out in the world with client-based VPN, that's it. Until it comes back to the CorpNet, gets on the LAN, you have no idea, generally speaking, what kind of shape that device is in. So in that case, I would say that you are in a much better position to affect change and maintain the security configuration of your direct access clients, and which reduces the risk, or the perceived risk, of split tunneling. All right, so one more. I think one more is one or two more. I forget. I think this is the last one. Many customers state, okay, great, I love direct access, but direct access is not supported for all clients. So, for example, it's supported only for Windows domain join managed clients, Windows 7 Ultimate, Windows 8, and later Enterprise Edition. If I have to support legacy operating systems, if I have to support home users that are not domain joined, or mobile devices, iPads, Androids, and whatnot, and I need to provide a level of access to the corporate network to them, do I need to deploy an additional remote access solution to support that client-based VPN? The answer is no. Of course, that's a myth. The Celestix E-Series appliance with Windows Server 2012 R2 Unified Remote Access does enable the DirectAccess and the client-based VPN to be co-located. So you can install a single device, a single appliance that supports both of those rules, both client-based VPN and DirectAccess. Now, just because you can do something does not necessarily mean that it's always a good idea. You certainly can do it, and it's generally acceptable for small and mid-sized deployments, but when you get into larger enterprises, it's generally not recommended due to some architectural constraints that are in place when you co-locate those rules. You actually lose some scalability and performance, and for large enterprises we recommend that you break those roles out, have a dedicated DirectAccess array and a dedicated client-based VPN array to support that. And honestly, client-based VPN in Windows Server 2012 R2 is awesome, provides support for L2TP over IPsec, PPTP, and so forth. And IPv2 as well, so that there's some good protocols there. It does actually support PPTP, so if anybody wants to support that legacy protocol, you can certainly do that. We don't recommend that though because it's obviously been deprecated. Very good. That brings us to the end of the session. So, are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer them. Let me see if I can. If you have a question, you can post it in the chat window, or there's a questions window here as well. Go ahead and post your questions in the question and answer there. Any questions at all? No, I must have done a good job debunking these myths today. I can't believe there's no questions. Good. So first question: what are the disadvantages to deploying behind a perimeter device? Good question. So the disadvantage there is that when you're supporting Windows 7 clients, and those clients, or when you're supporting Windows 7 clients, the only IPv6 transition protocol that you can use when you're supporting Windows 7, or when you're supporting any clients, behind a NAT device is IP-HTTPS. Okay, so the challenge with that, of course, is that IP-HTTPS encrypts traffic using SSL and TLS, and the IPv6 traffic that is in the tunnel is itself already encrypted with IPsec. So with Windows 8, this is not a problem because Windows 8 uses null encryption, but for Windows 7 it doesn't. And so you have this double encryption that takes place, and this high protocol overhead really limits scalability and can reduce performance if you don't scale out correctly or plan accordingly for that. So that's probably one of the biggest disadvantages. For me, I prefer that deployment because it does, again, provide that higher level of protection for our clients and for the server itself. So I think that for my personal comfort level, that's the way I like it. But some of my peers do like to have DirectAccess deployed directly on the internet, so they can take advantage of additional transition protocols such as Teredo and 6-4, which perform better and don't have that double overhead double encryption overhead challenge there. So I have a question here regarding Service Pro tablets, Service Pro 3 tablets that experience connectivity issues when moving among campus access points. What I would state is that I have a Surface Pro 3 and I have absolutely terrible time with the wireless. So I'm wondering if this is not so much a direct access issue as it is a wireless driver. So Rich, I would state that, again, based on my own experience with my Surface Pro 3, Microsoft is still trying to iron out some of the challenges or some of the issues with that. It seems like every monthly update comes with new wireless drivers, and I don't know that they've actually resolved that problem. But it's certainly possible that DirectAccess could be doing that, but DirectAccess is seamless and transparent. So as soon as you have a connection, those IPsec tunnels will reestablish. You'll reestablish those SAs, and the application should be able to handle that. I don't have any customers that I've worked with recently that have had this specific challenge, but again, based on my own experience with the Surface Pro 3, I suspect it's probably actually an issue with the wireless drivers as opposed to any challenges with Outlook. Any other questions at all? All right, very good. Well, we're at the end of our time. Any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Drop a note to sales@celestix.com. If you have technical questions, they'll forward those to me. If you're interested in more information about our solutions, celestix.com/edge. You can get a look at our turnkey, ready-to-deploy hardware appliance platform that we use to deliver Windows Server 2012 R2 remote access. Anyway, thanks for your time. I appreciate everybody. Again, send those questions to me, and I'll be happy to respond. But until then, we'll talk next time. Thanks.